Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. Pakistan and India have agreed to strictly observe all ceasefire agreements along the line of control and other sectors since midnight. Contacting on the hotline, the Director Generals of Military Operations of both countries also agreed to address core issues that might disturb peace. Pakistan's military's media wing says the two military officials reviewed the situation along the LOC in a frank and cordial manner. Pakistan says a third state is supporting cross-border terrorist attacks from the territory of the neighboring country. Speaking at United Nations Security Council's area formula, Pakistan's Ambassador Munir Akram said Islamabad respects the sovereignty of its neighboring state while maintaining its right to self-defense against the state sponsoring terrorism. At least 41 migrants have drowned in the central Mediterranean Sea after their boat capsized. In a joint statement, the UN's Human Rights and Migrants Agency said the dinghy had 120 people on board. They said the shipwreck demonstrates the urgent need to strengthen Europe's search and rescue system. The Pentagon says Russia remains an existential threat to the United States and Europe despite economic sanctions. The commander of the U.S. European Command Air Force General Todd Walters made the remarks in a military symposium. Walters accused Moscow of engaging in activities that seek to destabilize and malign Washington. The researchers in the United States have found a new coronavirus variant in New York City. The U.S.'s death toll has jumped to over 505,000 with more than 28.3 million infections. Meanwhile, France has reported over 31,000 new cases, the biggest daily increase since mid-November. In Pakistan, over 1,300 people contracted the virus while 64 died overnight, bringing the total to 12,762. While globally, the virus has claimed 2.5 million lives and infected over 112 million people so far. Now, these were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Pakistan and India have agreed to strictly observe all ceasefire agreements along the line of control and other sectors since midnight. This was agreed between the Director Generals of Military Operations of both countries during discussions over the established hotline. Pakistan military's media wing says the two military officials reviewed the situation along the LOC in a frank and cordial manner. They agreed to address core issues that might disturb peace and lead to violence. The ISPR added both sides reiterated that established mechanisms of hotline contact and border flag meetings must be used. They vowed to resolve any unseen situation or misunderstanding. India has committed more than 13,000 ceasefire violations since 2003 and 253 this year. Now, for more on this, we are joined by Lieutenant General Amjad Shoaib, retired from Islamabad. Sir, thank you for your time now. Pakistan and India have agreed to strictly observe all ceasefire agreements along the line of control and other sectors. How important this agreement is for peace in the region?
I think this is very significant, very important, but unfortunately, we have not been following it. Indians have not been implementing This understanding was already there right from 2000 onward, and we observed complete peace on the LOC till about 2013. But then I think from 2014 onward, when we had change of government in India and Modi came into power, then there was rampant violations of the LOC on one pretext or the other. And at the same time, the mechanism which was there to implement or to investigate all such incidents of violation, that was also violated by the Indians. We have the United Nations Observer Group on both sides of the LOC, but Indians do not allow them to come onto the LOC, and they stay in Srinagar. So even today, when we have agreed to observe ceasefire on the LOC, it is very important that these observers, they are given a chance, they are allowed to visit the LOC whenever there is any violation, because until and unless you investigate and put the blame on someone for the violation, it will continue. So one has to really keep the fingers crossed till we really see the strict implementation, although we have been able to revive the understanding.
Absolutely. Now, India's ceasefire violations along the line of control have reached a new high in the last few years. Will New Delhi abide by this latest agreement?
See, the agreement which was concluded, it is in fact an understanding which was there from 2003 onward. And we had a feeling that it was, I mean, in a gentleman's way, this was being implemented. And we expect that this will now be implemented, although the mechanism has been disturbed. The reason that I have a belief that they will implement this thing, because India has a lot of internal problems. They also have a lot of disturbance in Kashmir, that farmers, that pest is going on, and then they also have a confrontation on the Chinese border. So India is facing a lot many difficulties internally and externally, and perhaps they thought that this is the time that they should at least keep the LOC quiet. But I think it is in our interest, because we have our civilians along the LOC, and they have been suffering in a big way. There have been casualties, and there have been, I mean, they have not been able to go to their lands even, at places where the lands were threatened. So the life, I think, along the LOC will become a bit normal for the people on both sides.
Well, absolutely, and we hope so. General Amjad Shoaib, sir, thank you for talking to Indus. Now, for more on this, we have also been joined by Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodi from Islamabad. Sir, Pakistan and India have agreed on strict observance of all the agreements, understandings and ceasefire along the line of control and all other sectors. How do you see this development?
I think whichever side has taken the initiative, they have done a great thing. And especially once they have agreed to talk on the core issues, the only thing is, of course, the high-level interaction will only be possible if it goes right up to political level, which I think this contact will make a base for further talks as far as military-to-military talks are concerned, as far as government-to-government talks are concerned. And especially if they have also mentioned talking on the core issues, that is a great news. And for the time being, I would say that it is also a very good omen for all the civilians living along the line of control, because if you stop all these ceasefire violations, life will be much easier for them.
Right, and also, prizes, will this development help thaw in ties between both the countries?
You know, for a very long time, there was no talk going on. The communication was blocked. The governments were not talking. The militaries were not talking. The people were not allowed to really talk to each other. So once this thaw has taken place, it should be taken as a base for people-to-people contact, for government-to-government contact, for military-to-military contact. And I think this will go a long way in creating an environment in this region whereby we can talk to each other and resolve our issues. Because I always say that we are quite good in intellect as far as people of this region are concerned. Don't believe that if we sit down, we will not be able to resolve our issues. We can always do that. The only precondition is that The mistrust must be removed. Finger pointing at each other must not happen. And the talk must start, because once we start talking, then the doors keep on opening for further progress. That is what we expect.
Absolutely. General Naeem Khalid Lothi, sir, thank you for talking to Indus News. Now moving on, Pakistan says a third state is sponsoring cross-border attacks from the treasury of a neighbouring country. Ambassador Munir Akram was speaking at the United Nations Security Council's Area Formula meeting. Akram said Islamabad respects the sovereignty of its neighbouring states but has the right to defend itself against state-sponsored terrorism. He said the fight against terror has been utilised to justify the use of force and foreign intervention. Akram further said India's illegal military occupation of Kashmir was among the worst violations of the UN Charter. The envoy said that the Kashmiri struggle for the right to self-determination cannot be equated with terrorism. He said India was threatening to use force against Pakistan to divert attention from state-sponsored terrorism in occupied Kashmir. Meanwhile, in India, the right-wing BJP government is tightening the lid on freedom of expression further through more stringent censorship of social media. A draft regulation by New Delhi's plans to push social media firms to immediately erase content on government investigation. The proposed rules are widely used as a face-off in Modi and Twitter over content related to former protests in India. And Twitter have declined on the new regulations. India's opposition says the government turned into internet shutdown capital of the world. Moving on now, the Pentagon says Russia remains an existential threat to the United States and Europe despite economic sanctions. U.S. European Command's Commander Air Force General Todd Walters made the remarks in a military symposium. He said Russia engages in destabilizing and malign activities across the globe. The general said Russia seeks to maintain a sphere of influence. Walters accused Moscow of employing unconventional tools such as private military companies. He said Kremlin is attempting to intimidate and divide Washington's allies and partners. Responding to the statement, Russia has urged the U.S. to abandon its confrontational ideas on rivalry of global power. Now, the United States says its patience with Iran on returning to discussions over the 2015 nuclear deal is not unlimited. At a news briefing, State Department spokesperson Ned Price said Tehran's moves away from compliance with the deal made the issue an urgent challenge for Washington. Price said the most effective way to ensure Iran could never acquire a nuclear weapon is through diplomacy. Iran has not formally responded to a U.S. offer for a joint meeting with the signatories last week. Now, in Myanmar's city of Yangon, clashes have broken out between supporters and opponents of the military coup as authorities prevented students from the march. There have been about 3 weeks of daily protests and strikes, and students pledged to come out again. But police blocked the gates of the campus, stopping hundreds of students inside from coming out to march. At the same time, thousands of supporters of the military gathered for a rally in central Yangon. Media workers said the supporters threatened their photographers while one of them was slightly hurt. Doctors are also set to hold a protest today as part of a so-called white coat revolution. Meanwhile, Facebook has banned banned the Myanmar's military from using it and its Instagram platform with immediate effect. Now, at least 41 migrants have drowned in the central Mediterranean Sea after their boat capsized. In a joint statement, the UN's Human Rights and Migrants Agency said the dinghy had 120 people on board. They said missing migrants also include 3 children and 4 women. The agency said the shipwreck demonstrates the urgent need to strengthen Europe's search and rescue system. The statement said, saving the lives of migrants in distress must become a priority for the international community. It added some 160 persons have died in the central Mediterranean so far this year. Since 2014, more than 20,000 refugees have died at sea while trying to reach Europe from Africa. And the researchers in the United States have found a new coronavirus variant in New York City. The U.S. death toll has jumped to over 505,000 with more than 28.3 million infections. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.5 million lives and infected over 112 million people. More on the pandemic in this report. Although the US and most South American states saw a 30% decline in new cases and deaths in the last week, infections could spike again due to new variants. Pan American Health Organization says vaccines are in short supply and it will be months before inoculations affect the rate of cases. The researchers say the new virus variant is spreading rapidly in New York City and it carries a mutation that may weaken the effectiveness of vaccines. Moderna says it is working with US government scientists to study an experimental booster shot that targets a concerning new variant. Meanwhile, Johnson & Johnson's one-shot vaccine also appeared safe and effective in trials, paving the way for its approval for emergency use.
I think this news from the Food and Drug Administration is very encouraging. We know that we need to get more people vaccinated, especially when there's a variant around. Because remember, viruses can't mutate if they can't survive. So the more people we get vaccinated, the better. And to have another vaccine available, and I expect it'll be authorized this weekend, is really going to help in terms of getting as many people vaccinated in as short as time as possible. So it's very good news.
In Europe, France reported over 31,000 new cases, the biggest daily increase since mid-November. Paris has also announced a weekend lockdown in the Dunkirk area while keeping other areas under watch in a ray of light amid grim news. A study in the UK showed strong antibody responses in people who have received 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine. The European Union's vaccine rollout continues to stutter due to delivery delays, limiting the bloc to only a fraction of its planned inoculations. Meanwhile, unlike its previous approach, the Swedish government announced to step up its restrictions in a bid to avoid third wave.
The situation in Sweden is serious. We have a high spread of infection and it is continuing to increase. The mutations mean that this situation is even more worrying. There is a big risk of a third wave. This is not predetermined, but it is your and our collective behavior that determines whether that will be the case.
South Korea distributed the AstraZeneca vaccines to hospitals and public health centers across the country as it kicks off its mass inoculation drive. Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 64 deaths from COVID-19 overnight. The Health Ministry says the fatalities toll has risen to 12,772. It said 1,361 more people contracted the virus in the last 24 hours out of nearly 576,000 infected. In the country, nearly 540,000 have recovered. However, there are still more than 23,000 active cases in Pakistan. The ministry said just over 2,000 patients are admitted to hospitals across the country. Now, US Senator Bernie Sanders has lashed out at Israel for donating surplus coronavirus vaccines to foreign allies while depriving the Palestinians. Earlier, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Tel Aviv is sending out spare vaccines. In a tweet, Sanders said Israel is responsible for the health of Palestinians as an occupying power. He termed Netanyahu's decision as outrageous. The senator added many Palestinians in the occupied territories are still waiting for vaccination. Now, President Joe Biden has revoked his predecessor's order that blocked many green card applicants from entering the U.S. Donald Trump had issued the ban last year, saying it was needed to protect U.S. workers amid high unemployment. In a statement, the White House said Biden overturned the measure through an executive order. It said the ban does not advance the interests of the U.S. The statement read the Trump order also prevented people from joining their families in the U.S. However, Biden has left in place another ban on most foreign temporary workers. Pakistan is celebrating successful 50 years of the Dassault Mirage warplane in its Air Force. Pakistan Air Force marked the occasion with a special event held in Shaw Court. Pakistan's President Arif Alvi distributed souvenirs among Pakistan Air Force officers. Addressing the ceremony, President Alvi said Pakistan Air Force ensured the country's defense despite belligerent neighbor. He said PAF depicted professionalism, excellence and produced honest leadership. Earlier, Pakistan's Air Chief Marshal Mujahid Anwar Khan greeted President Alvi as he arrived to take part in the celebrations. The President witnessed the flypast of Cobra formation of the 34th Tactical Attack Wing of the Pakistan Air Force. Now, Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez says U.S. allegations of his ties with cartels could affect cooperation in fighting drug trafficking. This comes after U.S. prosecutors accused Hernandez of protecting traffickers in order to assert his power in the country. They accuse him of accepting a $1 million bribe from Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. But the Honduran president, who is a key U.S. ally in Central America, has denied the allegations. Hernandez said the Los Cajiros cartel falsely accused him in an effort to seek shorter prison sentences. Addressing the Honduran Congress, he warned U.S. officials that allegations could compromise joint security efforts.
If certain offices in the United States make the mistake of rewarding drug traffickers who give false testimony instead of increasing their penalties, if that error happens, then the battle that we have jointly waged with our allies against drug trafficking may become unsustainable.
Earlier, Democratic senators introduced legislation to impose sanctions on Hernandez for corruption and human rights abuses. Now moving to Ecuador, where the death toll from riots between rival gangs in 4 prisons has risen to 79. While Ecuador's National Police head says a new mutiny in Guayaquil's prison is underway. In a tweet, the official said police are preparing to enter again with necessary rational force. Confirming the new riots, the prison authority said its agents are coordinating with Ecuador's National Police. Yesterday, the riots broke out in prisons in the Guayaquil, Cuenca and Latacunga cities simultaneously. Earlier, the government said the order was restored while some police officers were also wounded during the riots. President Lenin Moreno has declared a temporary state of emergency in prisons across the Andean country. Now, in Indonesia, 3 people have died after a landslide hit an illegal gold mining area in central Sulawesi province. The provincial disaster management officials say more people are feared dead as 5 are still missing. In a statement, they said rescue teams are deployed at the site with heavy machinery to help the search. The officials added so far 15 survivors have been rescued. The landslide in the village of Buranga occurred after days of heavy rain. The Australian Parliament has passed the final amendments to a media law that forces tech giants to pay for news content. Tweaks to the law were made after Facebook blocked access to Australian news outlets on its pages. The law incentivizes tech giants and news organizations to negotiate payment deals. In a joint statement, Treasurer Josh and Communications Minister Paul said the code will ensure that news businesses are fairly remunerated for the content they generate. They added it will also help sustain public interest in journalism in Australia. Australia is the first country where a government arbitrator will decide the price to be paid by tech giants if talks fail. Whale watchers in the U.S. state of California got up close and personal with a huge humpback whale. It was filmed on camera mugging boats off the coast of Newport Beach. Mugging refers to when a whale swims close to a boat and stays close while interacting with those on the boat. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says humpback whales can grow up to 60 feet and 40 tons. They can live about 80 to 90 years. Despite their huge size, humpback whales are considered as one of the gentlest animals in the world. Pakistan is home to nearly 3 million Afghan refugees who have built their homes and businesses in the country over the past few decades. Though thousands have been repatriated back to Afghanistan, Pakistan continues to host a sizable refugee population. This report by our correspondent Minahil Ahmed has more.
The story of refugees is one of resilience, perseverance, and courage. One such story involves Salim Hashimi, who came to Pakistan as a refugee during the Soviet-Afghan War. Hailing from the city of Jalrez in Maidan Wardak province, Hashimi opened his own restaurant 2 years ago in Islamabad.
People visit Islamabad from all over the world. Due to the diversity of the city, I knew that people would be accepting to different flavors in cuisine.
Muhammad Ahmed is another Afghan refugee who is a proud owner of a French fries cart in the capital's Jinnah supermarket. Originally from Mazar Sharif, Amir considers Pakistan his home and says the country has given him multiple opportunities.
I was born and raised in Pakistan as a second-generation refugee. The government of Pakistan has granted us with all sorts of facilities.
Despite the huge financial challenges, Pakistan has given its guests access to health and education services. As the prospect of peace in Afghanistan improves, the focus could indeed turn to how to bring about the orderly return of refugees after years of insecurity. Minahil Ahmed, Indus News, Islamabad.
Iconic cartoon characters Tom and Jerry are returning to screens, but this time they're entering the real world. In the new movie, the pair take their competitive antics to a posh hotel in New York. More in this report. Tom and Jerry were created back in 1940. The cartoons have had continued success over 8 decades, seemingly never putting a foot or paw wrong with audiences. Their comedic, slapstick violence returns at the scene of the biggest celebrity wedding of the decade. In the film, chaos ensues, and it's up to a hotel employee to try and curb the pair's long-standing behavioral problems.
It really does harken back to the Tom and Jerry that we love. It's 2D animation with little elements of 3D, but it's predominantly 2D animation, which I think, you know, as a fan, was a really big deal for me. And then as well as that, you know, they don't shy away from them bonking each other on the head and dropping the weights on each other and really going at each other.
Comedian Colin Jost plays one half of the celebrity couple in the movie. He feels the time is right for the warring couple to return to our screens during a pandemic.
It's such a pure, goofy comedy right now. To see that kind of physical comedy, especially from cartoon characters, that I think it's a huge relief right now. I mean, to have, like, the fact that they don't talk and they just take out all their feelings with violence, I think is very refreshing to see right now, and people can let out a lot of their frustrations through these characters.
Yes! Filming the comedy was a surreal experience for the actors. Often, they did not have a script, and they also had to deal with a lot of cat and mouse stand-ins.
Oh my gosh!
Well, I definitely can't wait for this one. Now, designer Kim Jones has made his ready-to-wear debut at Rome-based Fendi at Milan Fashion Week. He presented a neutral-toned autumn-winter line. Details in this report. Following in the footsteps of late designer Karl Lagerfeld, who collaborated with Fendi for 54 years, Kim Jones opened the presentation with a fur coat, a brand staple. Coats, cropped knit tops, high-waisted trousers, and pinstripe silk shirt dresses followed. Models wore utilitarian jackets, marbled silk or draped dresses, and fringed scarves in pale pink, white, mink, grey, and black. Jones nodded to past creations of the Fendi family, who founded the brand in 1925, and Lagerfeld. Milan Fashion Week runs until 1st of March, with brands such as Armani, Prada, and Valentino sharing their collections videos on a digital platform instead of hosting live shows because of COVID-19 restrictions. Now, US President Joe Biden has signed an executive order aimed at addressing a global semiconductor chip shortage. The dearth has forced US automakers and other manufacturers to cut production. Talking to reporters, Biden said Americans should never face shortages in goods and services they rely on. Biden said he will seek $37 billion in funding for legislation to supercharge chip manufacturing in the United States.
Second, this order initiates a long-term review of the industry bases of 6 sectors of our overall economy over the next year. These reviews will identify policy recommendations to fortify our supply chains at every step, and critically to start implementing those recommendations right away.
And now in the Pakistan Super League, Islamabad United beat Karachi Kings by 5 wickets at the National Stadium in Karachi. Shajil Khan's century went in vain as United chased down the 197-run target in the final over. Khan and Babar Azam put on a 150-run partnership to help Kings post a big total. In reply, United's Alex Hales, Iftikhar Ahmed and Hussain Thalit played blistering innings to help their side win the match. Alex Hales was declared player of the match for scoring 46 of 21 deliveries. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the world. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.